like full front, like basically 90% in the back. And then that was week 2. I did that in the first half. Played the rest of the game, was fine. But then 4 weeks later, we were playing the Cardinals, and I dislocated my shoulder again. But I dislocated it so bad and at a different angle that the bone, like the humerus that goes up into your shoulder socket, like the big bone right here, comes up into your ball and socket, and it forced its way out, and I fractured the bone because it wasn't going to be like just a clean exit.
Right.
So I fractured the bone. So when I had the labrum done and that fracture, the inflammation, everything, I had no function in my left shoulder. And we were going into a Thursday game that week. Monday I couldn't lift my arm, but I literally when I couldn't raise my arm, I was like, I can't do this.
That was the Thursday night game against, who did they play? Denver Broncos, right?
Yeah.
That was the Case Keenum game.
Yep.
And remember, that was the week. Okay, this gives us some interesting context because it was an ugly dislocation the second time when he busted the shoulder. And remember, on Tuesday of that week, he was basically saying, hey, it's up to me. I'm paraphrasing, but I'll decide whether or not I play.
I've got the quote. Yeah.
And this is a day after. This is a day after he's made the decision, I can't do this.
Right. I know. Well, no, what he said, and I've got it right here. He goes, I have to make that decision. Only I know how my body feels. And if anyone questions whether I'm hindering the team going out there injured, that's just not right. So it's my decision. I get to say whether I'm able to play or not. And that's just how it is. So, now he's saying that, it was just a weird thing. It was weird when it happened. And I'm like, what do you mean I make the decision whether or not I play? That's not when the whole thing that Chris Mortensen, not Morten Anderson, said where the Browns want more of an adult at quarterback. This is kind of the stuff you mean, where it's like you're not going to press conferences and saying no, I decide when I play, or you're not skipping your media obligations because you beat the Detroit Lions, but you played like crap. That's the maturity stuff where it's like, okay, dude, you were hurt. And that's fine. These things happen, it's not your fault really that you got hit by JJ Watt like that and you came down badly and then it re-injured the shoulder. Now we can debate whether or not it was his fault that he got hurt in the first place. But there are just a lot of things there that I just feel like throughout listening to that 90-minute, podcast, it was a miserable year for everybody. It seems like with the Browns when it comes to Baker Mayfield included. It seemed miserable from all the things that he was talking about.
And I'm thinking back to the hour and a half of my life that I invested into listening to that podcast today. And I worked while I listened to it. So it wasn't a complete waste of time, but I could have had something else on. I could have had the news on. I'm trying to rewatch all of Better Call Saul before season 6 debuts because I find myself with some of these shows that haven't been on for like a year or two. Like when we watched Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, the latest season, the first episode is like, what the hell's going on? I've completely forgotten. And they just assume we all know exactly what had happened in the last episode. It's like cliffhangers aren't what they used to be. When the show disappears for 2 years, you kind of forget what the cliffhanger was. So anyway, instead, I devoted 90 minutes to listening to this. But God, why don't you? And again, I'm not faulting these guys because you know what? If these guys were ready to ask Baker Mayfield all the tough questions, he wouldn't have done it. Baker Mayfield, I think, selected this because he knew what it was going to be, and it wasn't going to be. So what did you think when ESPN reported that the Browns want an adult at the quarterback position? They really could have stirred some crap if they wanted to, and they didn't. And maybe that was, hey, ground rules happen all the time. They happen all the time. And they're not going to come on and say, by the way, in order to get Baker Mayfield to agree to do this, we agreed to ask only a handful of pre-approved questions about his time with the Cleveland Browns, which possibly occurred as well. I don't know anything about this podcast. I never would have watched it or listened to it, but for the fact that Baker Mayfield was on it. And I mean no disrespect. There's a lot of podcasts out there they don't have the time or the desire to listen to. They're not for me. I know what I like. I know what I want. I know what I watch. I know what I consume. I'd never heard of this one before. I don't know if it's a big deal. I don't know if it's a little deal. I don't know anything about it. All I know is there was a lot more there that I wish Baker Mayfield would have been asked about, including what did you think about Mortensen's report?
Yeah, of course. But I mean, there were some interesting things that I felt like kind of gave some insight into his character, since I was listening to this for like 90 minutes. Like when he was talking about how he got arrested, right? Back when he was still at Oklahoma, and they ended up doing some sort of internal discipline, but not really all that much. And it was like, he just kind of brushed it off as like this not big deal thing, where it's like, oh yeah, I got a little public intox. That's like, bro, like you also ran from the police. Like this is not nothing that he got arrested. And it was just like, I don't know, it showed the privilege of his way of thinking and his mindset, where it's just like, yeah, I mean, this happened, like, bah. But it also was true, because it's not like that was any real part of the discussion leading up to him getting selected with the #1 overall pick. And he also won the Heisman. And it's like, well, Baker Mayfield, he's this, he's that. He gets to rally his teammates around him and all this. And like, he's, got this moxie, and, they'll be able to get him in Cleveland, and he'll get them. And it's like, so, I mean, like, I get that part of it. And then also when he's like, oh man, I wish I could go to somebody's cubicle and like boo the bleep out of them. I was like, bro, like, you're a professional quarterback, man. Like, this is the most scrutinized position in sports. And like, I get that, like, nobody wants nastiness. I don't necessarily think that people deserve to like be just treated poorly all the time. But like, but in one breath he says that, and in another he's like, well, I love it when I go to another stadium and they're like booing me, and then I make a play and I silence the crowd. It's like, all right, well, like, that's kind of what being a fan is, and it's what being a professional athlete is, and that's why you get paid so much money. It's because you're entertaining us, and you have real talent, and like nobody who's I think I know a few people who, if they got paid $18 million this year, would be like, yeah, Baker, come and boo me and tell me how terrible I am at my cubicle. So I don't know.
It was a fascinating window into who he is. He admitted to having a Napoleon complex at one point, and he is a guy who you can tell during a game when he makes a big play, he's got an extra little juice. And I prefer a guy who doesn't need that extra motivation to hit his highest possible level. But it tells me that my hunch is right. He'd love to play for the Steelers. What better way? And if the Steelers get him, if I'm the Steelers, I'm thinking, holy crap, this guy is going to be ultra motivated to compete with the Browns every week, even when he's not playing the Browns. Every win from the Steelers affects the Browns. And his entire season is going to be devoted to making the Browns regret the way they treated this guy. Even if we decide not to keep him beyond 2022, this guy is going to be on a 17-game vendetta against the Browns. This is the guy we need. And even though he didn't say anything about the Steelers, the way he's wired, that came out. And he would love, I believe, to go back to Cleveland this year and play the Browns. And if he could play the Browns at home and on the road, even better. And if he crosses paths with them in the playoffs, even better. That's what he is thriving on if it potentially happens.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.